Okay. I think we're going to go ahead and start. Let's do a test. Someone from the stream talk. Oh, that didn't work. Let me try this again. Okay, great. We're working.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. All right. So to the agenda, what do we got here? So instead of the fork review going first, let's do testing first, because then from there we can talk about the review. So, if Martin or Casey, could you go over, because there's kind of some confusion amongst people, the two types of fuzzers that we're using, if we can talk about that, and which ones or which one found the majority of the bugs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yes, there are two different tracks on the fuzz testing, and the one that we started with earliest was based on testf, generating a random state test, and then we use that to execute in Ethereum, CPP, parity, and get. And then we compare the outputs after every operation, because there have been modifications made to the clients, or actually to the raw EVMs, so that for each instruction made, it outputs JSON blob with the internal state, the stack, and memory, and so forth. And yes, we just do that, run them, and compare the outputs, and notifies if anything differs. And that enables us to find changes that might not have been consensus issues necessarily, if there is only a dip in memory, but which could become consensus issues. And that's the first approach. That one is pretty slow. Right now it's using Docker containers for everything. I'm working right now to improve that and use raw binaries instead. I don't know how we'll fit Python into it, but maybe make a persistent container instead. Anyway, that one I think it's found 3 flaws, consensus issues. The other approach is using a libfuzzer, and it's a framework being developed by Guido Branken. He has earlier written fuzzers for Bitcoin and a lot of stuff. And it is using instrumented versions of get and parity, where it's instrumented them to measure code coverage. And basically, so libfuzzer-based approach is that the input is guided by the coverage. So, and then it makes modifications, and it sees if it gets better path coverage from the new input, and it kind of makes better and better inputs to get really good code coverage. And it also checks for minor discrepancies in the execution, looking at the trace and the memory contents and the stack contents and stuff like that. I think that fuzzer is a lot quicker. It manages to do thousands of executions per second, because both of the clients are basically compiled into one binary that you just run. So it's extremely a lot quicker. I think it's found 2 issues. So 3 from testdev, 2 from that one. And yeah, we're running all fuzzers on the server, or on several servers, and we'll keep running them.
Okay, cool. And when did we start running those before the fork? Because that's going to help us kind of review the fork in general.
Not that long, a couple of weeks. We've been basically messing with the testf-based fuzzer since before the summer. But there's been a lot of work on getting all the quirks ironed out from the EVM binaries and getting the the individual outputs to align, because there are differences to the implementations of the
Okay.
EVMs.
Okay, great. So that's kind of what I thought, and I think I think we're getting donated some server resources soon, so that should help take the load off. Um, and so that's going to help a little bit. Um, so yeah, any other comments on testing? And like you were saying, we're just improving on that more, adding more servers. Any other comments from you or Casey or anybody?
Um, the manually written test cases, there's something to be improved because after the fork, there are still unimplemented test cases. Many new test cases were proposed last weeks before the fork.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. When when either of the fuzz testers finds a consensus bug, that test case may not work as a state test because oftentimes the bug is only a difference in at some steps in the trace, but then the state root is the same at the end of the test. And since state tests only check the state root, they don't compare the traces, the execution traces. In order to create state tests from bugs that the fuzzer finds, they have to be manually created so that the bug ends up with a different state root. And so that still needs to be done for the bugs that it's found.
Okay, interesting. Great. So it sounds like we're still in progress on some of those things, and let us know if you guys need more support on that, if we can call in people from other teams or from the community again to kind of help with some of that, especially the manual cases. Because I don't know how many volunteers are still actively working on that since the last time we did a call for participation.
Most of the newly proposed cases are based on already known bugs that have been already fixed.
Okay, great.
Given that maybe me and or two people slowly covering these would be enough. These test cases will prevent degradations in the future, but not really urgent, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I see. So they're not urgent because we've already fixed the one. They've been found in a different suite, and we've already fixed it. It's just for future clients and stuff. Okay. So yeah, unless there's anything else with testing, I'm going to go ahead to item 2. If you want to refresh your agendas, I just kind of updated it to put things in order. So this is just a review of the Byzantium fork. So just kind of as a verbal review. I think it was 3 or 4 days before we had the Byzantium fork. We had some one emergency patch with parity. We had a few more in the days following, I think 2 more, and then we had and those were consensus bugs for those 3 to 4 patches, and then the day before or 2 days before we had a geth denial of service bug that would have taken nodes offline, the 1.7.1 nodes, and then so a 1.7.2 node was released. And then in the case of parity, they released 1.7.6, which was bug-free and Byzantium compatible. They also then released 1. Arcady, you might need to correct me, but is it 1.8.0?
Actually, we released both 1.7.7 and 1.8.0.
Perfect.
I couldn't hear you.
Oh yeah, if you could turn your microphone up a little bit, Arcady.
So yeah, we've released both 1.7.7 and 1.8.0.
Great.
There are different release channels. One is feature, another is feature.
Okay. So yeah, so that was kind of the build up to it, and there, we kind of got some feedback from the community and from Bitcoin Maximalist and people who hate us that we were putting out a ton of fixes beforehand, but in my estimation, or I guess my opinion, I would say that because of the way we were running the fuzzers, this was kind of not even expected, but this is something that definitely could have happened, and it did. So I don't really feel that badly that we had some releases right beforehand. I think it's not good, but like it's better to do that than to, ignore fuzzers or to ignore test cases. So that's kind of where I am on this. Granted, I think in the future we should definitely have some provisions to run the fuzzers for a longer time before we declare the hard fork. In this case, we wanted to somewhat keep in mind the block times to make sure that they didn't get too long and that we didn't have the hard fork around DevCon, but we could have definitely planned this out better. So I think, Vitalik, you had mentioned you had some thoughts on this, so if you want to start, and then we can kind of go around the room.
Like thoughts on what aspect of it particularly were you thinking about?
Improvement, or basically what you think went
Yeah.
wrong this time, and then improvements for the future.
Yeah, so first of all, I guess back when we had our core dev meeting, I think it was something like 4 weeks ago, so September 22nd. Like, I got the impression when I was suggesting 4.37 million, I got the impression that, and when I before then suggested 3 weeks, I had the impression that basically literally 2 days after the meeting on September 22nd, we would release the hard fork version and like actually give people 3 weeks to do the full upgrade. And yet somehow this just ended up not happening. So that was like, I guess in the future, like I would prefer we actually do give the literal 3 weeks between release of the client and release of the fork code. Like I realized Metropolis was a weird situation because we did have the Ice Age to fight against, but in any kind of commerce situation, it seems more prudent to do it that way. At least that was one thing that I remember saying. The aside from that, I mean, I think that we, in terms of just rollout and kind of quality in general, we probably did the best that we could given the self-imposed timeline. The thing that like the other main takeaway that I got just basically is that we should be much more conservative about the kinds of changes that we're willing to integrate and basically be afraid of consensus complexity. And particularly be afraid of consensus complex things that give a 1.1x improvement when we can use the same effort to do things that give us a 20x improvement.
Okay. Something else that I heard a lot, and I know Gavin went on, gave word to CoinDesk and did some tweets and other things to kind of argue the case that the amount of time between bugs before the hard fork warranted a 2 week stoppage, basically an emergency stop and 2 week delay at least for the hard fork. So is that the kind of metric that we need to have in the future for basically say if there is a bug X amount of days before the hard fork that there should be an emergency stop, or is that something that's not a good metric to measure by?
I think you also need to take into consideration what the emergency stop means, because if the emergency stop means releasing 2, 3, 4, or however many clients and convincing the entire ecosystem to stop, then that's a completely different ballpark than if the emergency stop meaning maybe updating a contract to just not fork.
Yeah, I should be more clear on that. So emergency stop to me means if there is a planned hard fork on a Tuesday and it's like a Sunday, the Sunday before, and we find a bug, that we delay the hard fork for a certain amount of times. Or days, I should say, or blocks.
Yeah, but that still depends exactly on what Peter said. How good and how dynamic is our handbrake in that situation? That would determine.
I see. So what? And actually, yeah, what is a good dynamic handbrake? As you're saying, is that can we do it by a contract? Is that a possibility? Because I heard some people saying that, and then others saying that poses a centralization risk.
Wow.
Regarding Yeah,
So
you
one
go
way,
ahead, Peter.
sorry. So the one way that we could say we could prevent too much centralization or too much power in a contract is maybe just so instead of having a contract that kind of directs when the whole fork would happen, you basically would still hard code the fork block into the client, and maybe just have a contract that could just stop the fork, meaning that basically if the contract triggered before the fork, then basically clients go on without forking. Because this way, it's a bit less control.
That makes sense, but who would be responsible for declaring that a fork could be stopped? Would that be, I guess, client teams and prominent community members decided on a yearly basis or something?
Well, yeah. But of course,
I'm
that's
sure-
a debate.
I'm sure we could. I mean, I think the issue of who has the keys or which persons have the keys to, set the hard fork or delay the hard fork, I think that can be solved. I'm curious about the technical implementation because there were some concerns that it wouldn't work for light clients and stuff. So do we have those kinds of technical limitations? Is that, is
so
that legit?
So the point is that it's having anything in a contract state that complicates light clients too, and for example fast sync too. So that's why I was suggesting that if we try to keep it as simple as possible, then maybe it's easy enough. Because if you want to set the fork block in the contract, then all of a sudden all the clients need to keep track of the contracts throughout the lifetime of the chain, and then things get messy. But if we have, for example, if every client is hard-coded that, okay, Serenity will fork at block, I don't know, 6 million, and then at block 5,999,999, the client checks whether the fork is still on or not, then it's enough.
And did you say light clients could handle that?
So if there are light servers available, then sure. But so all in all, the other thing that we need to be aware is that these should be emergency measures. So for example, I assume that if we postpone a hard fork, then eventually all clients will issue an update that will remove the fork block or change the fork block number. So you only need to have this emergency break. You only need to make it functional for a few days if there is an emergency. So
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think that that's something that we could definitely do. And something else, and this was actually brought up in chat, which is another good metric, is the rate of new bugs, like how quickly they are discovered back to back. But is that actually a good measure of how ready we are, or is that something that happens very randomly because we're using a fuzzer?
Somewhere in between.
Yeah, I'm really cautious to actually use that as a measure of readiness because of how random a fuzzer can act. Or, you know what I mean? Like, once it finds a bug, it's just, it found it because of random inputs.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've kind of gone over, some of the measures that we need to take potentially. So the contract is one of them. Something else that Vitalik mentioned was having clients have like a cutoff day for their releases, be a little more strict about that, so that we can then have better timelines for, we have X many weeks for testing, we have this many weeks for a testnet period going up. Something else might be, and this isn't something that actually affected the fork, but I think we could have had a more concerted effort to to mess with the new opcodes on the testnet, because by the hard fork date, I don't even know if we tested all of the opcodes exactly. At least I'm unaware that we did.
I was going to say that in my mind, the testnet deployment, it served us in getting some error reports on from services which, like for Etherscan, hadn't implemented the status. So they, using the testnet, they could implement the status, and there was a problem with gas estimations, but it didn't actually find any real critical bugs, only like on the side kind of bugs. But what the testnet deployment did was force the client implementations to actually include the Byzantium code in master, which enabled us to do fuzz testing and not have to use rebased branches on everything just to be able to get to it. So I'm kind of disappointed in. I don't think that testnet deployments give a lot of interesting testing for consensus stuff. It gives a bit of, it's a bit of help for the community to be able to try out new stuff, but I don't think we should rely on it too much for testing.
I agree with you, except for I think that might change when we get to Casper, because that's such a massive, I guess, difference in how things are done at a consensus level. I feel like that's going to be a noticeable difference on testnet that people are going to want to see.
Mm-hmm.
For example, one thing that so opcode style, probably our consensus tests or whatever tests can be a fairly good thing, but networking wise, the consensus tests are worthless, of course. So just seeing how the whole network behaves, how peers start dropping off or not dropping off when they split into different chains. So for example, I remember in Olympic when we had a chain split and the entire network fell apart, and it was really a pain in the ass to merge it back together. And I think that test networks are really valuable in this respect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
This time around, there was the dev P2P, or the version 5 flag that Geth had implemented, but parity wasn't compatible with. And that type of thing we could catch by running the right simulations in Hive to make sure that peer network protocols are compatible.
Yeah, but so what you cannot run in Hive is, for example, if you have a network and let's say half of your nodes don't update, or a lot of lazy people don't update, and those are scenarios that are really hard to test out in a simulated environment.
Right.
So, I was kind of wanting the opinion from the Geth team, and also just to clarify the opinion from the Parity team. So Parity has an auto-update feature. It was broken up until 1.7.6, I believe, or maybe it was. Where was it broken, Arkady?
Yeah, exactly. It was broken. It was fixed in 1.7.7.
Great. So that feature, though, that is actually, is that anything that can be opt out, or is that something if you have the Parity client you have to participate in?
You have to opt in, actually.
Opt in. Oh, I see. So when you start it, it like gives you an option.
Yeah, it's command line option or a configuration file option. So by default, it allows critical updates. So we can kind of choose if an update is critical, and then it will be installed by default.
I see.
Regular updates are rejected.
Okay. So Peter, the Geth team, I think in the past has been reticent to have a feature like that, but what's you guys' opinion today on having something that is an optional, something kind of like what Mist does, where they have a protected repo that has like a file that has the latest Geth release that they can sync to Mist from people who download it?
So the important thing to know with Mist is that Mist has a user interface. So basically when you start Mist, then it can just pop you a window that do you want to upgrade or not. And Geth, on the other hand, is meant to run in the background, probably without, or possibly without even having any user interface or user interaction at all. And that means that Geth would need kind of to figure it out itself, whether to update or not update, or to update. And that becomes a bit problematic.
I see, because you don't want anything on a headless install stopping the whole execution of the backend process in order to warn someone of something.
Yes, the point is that if, for example, let's say that an exchange is running Geth in the background, do you really want that process to start thinking of itself?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So all in all, maybe I don't know if people are people using Geth are I would say they are probably either running Mist, in which case you do have the auto update, or they are possibly running installed from Ubuntu PPAs or whatever, in which case it auto updating again becomes a bit messy. How do you update it? We could basically download a binary and just switch over to some newer binary when you run the old one. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that if I was like a service running it, either having a message pop up, like along with all the, like if you're in console mode, having a message pop up, or having it as a command line option for those who don't want to, who want to know when an update's happening and their node can go offline, but otherwise they just want it to be up. So basically, for those subset of people, it's not a huge portion of people running Geth, I would say, but it's enough to where that little bit might help people who, because those are also the same people who would forget to update in the first place, the ones who have a full node running and they just leave it on all the time. And once it goes offline, they just restart it again. It's not like critical to their infrastructure or anything. Those kind of people might be benefited by something that actually warns their node or stops their node or things like that if they decide to opt in.
Yeah, I guess so. For quite a long time, we had a version oracle in Geth that basically every hour or so or whatever checked the smart contract and just reported if there was a newer version that you were running. But it was kind of annoying to always keep bumping the version numbers, and we didn't really see the benefit, as basically it was just a log deep inside your usual logs, and then I don't think anyone is actually looking at their logs. So maybe what we could do is basically have an opt-in mechanism where the node would just kind of stop and force you to update if you opt in, but I don't know who would do that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think if it's a command line option, I think I mean, even if just one person does it, what are we at, like 10,000 nodes or something? Like, even if just a subset does it, I mean, depending on our growth and how many nodes will be there in the future, like, that, I mean, it won't hurt, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Don't
Yeah, and the other problem is that with Geth, we're kind of trying to do bi-weekly releases.
Yeah, that's true.
So if every second week your node stops, then you're going to get angry really fast.
Yeah, no, I think it's more for the critical hard fork releases is what Arcady was referring to. So what they have by default is critical. So that would be, Arcady, am I right to say that that would be hard fork only, like, releases?
Yeah, actually, I think we haven't published any critical updates yet.
Okay.
To have it for hard forking.
I see. So what would be considered a critical update?
So yeah, a hard fork would be considered critical update.
Okay.
Or a critical.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, yeah, this is something we'll discuss more, probably, or you can discuss with your team, Peter. But yeah, just kind of wanted to get people thinking. And I should actually also say, Mikhail at the Java team, what about you guys? Do y'all have any kind of plans or ideas around an auto update mechanism?
Actually, we didn't have such plans before. I've heard about parity way to work around critical updates, and it might be that in some future we will implement something like that. In my opinion, this approach is pretty good, and since we have a UI, we could do that.
Cool. Yeah, yeah, because Harmony is a front end, so or has a UI, so that would be really cool. All right, so we've kind of gone through updating. We've gone through some lessons learned, and so for any future hard forks or major protocol updates that require coordination, I think that we should have an EIP in place that designates things like time between the last bug found and the hard fork, how long the testnet should run, things like that. And so I think Nick mentioned he wanted to help with that, and then I can help with that. I talked to Rob at Eth Waterloo, and I think he also mentioned that he'd be happy helping with something like that. So, and Arcady, if there's anyone else from the Parity team who wants to, feel free to get them involved. I'll probably be starting on that when I get a free moment, which might not be before DevCon, but we'll get it done in the next. We'll at least start on it in the next month.
Okay, sure. I'll ask around.
Great. Same thing with getting the EIPs kind of on track. They've been a little sloppy still lately, so we're still trying to get those. We need to merge all of the Byzantium ones and finish the meta EIP for that. Which I think who's on? Is it Casey and Alex doing the meta EIPs? The others are done.
Yeah, I have a PR for that already.
Okay, perfect.
But it does need some polishing.
Okay, no problem. Cool. Is there anyone else who has opinions on how the hard fork went, how it should go in the future? Any comments? Okay, great. The next item on the agenda, core team updates. So I'll just go through the core teams, and if you have anything you want to talk about, for Parity, I know they just had a major release, which has a lot of cool features, so they can talk about that if they want. If the Geth team has any major fixes or releases they want to discuss, anybody has cool stuff. We'll start with Geth.
Nope, everybody's preparing for DEF CON.
Okay, great. Parity?
No, there is not much in terms of core protocol features. So, yeah.
Great. Java?
No updates.
Cool. I know you guys were working on some of the testing stuff. Are y'all still working? I think it was getting the state test implemented, or is that what y'all finished last time?
We have started to work on Hive integration.
Hive, that's what it was. Sorry, I got it confused.
Yeah, and we have started to work on it before the fork, and I just got back to it today because I had to fix some issues which were related to the fork. So yeah, I guess I will continue to work on integration during next week.
Yeah, ping me if there's anything you're wondering about the Hive stuff.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Thanks, Martin.
Ethereum JS, Casey, is there anything?
I don't think so.
Cool. Oh, Arcady just said that snappy compression support is in Parity now, so that's great.
Yeah, I forgot about that, to mention that.
No problem. And then CPP Ethereum, is there anyone here who can speak to that? I don't know.
I believe Andre is working on the quicker state thinking. I'm still removing some thread sanitizer warnings about deadlocks and so on.
Okay, great. Who am I missing? I guess, Python. So Vitalik, any updates on that?
The main thing we've been working on in Python most recently is just making PyEthap work with Python 3 better. And just in general, it's having trouble connecting to the network and getting peers, so trying to fix that.
Sure. And so I think Piper Merriam was working on some type of Python implementation. How is that related to PyEthap?
It's fairly separate so far.
Okay. Sounds good. And then do you want to give any kind of a research update, Vitalik? Because that'll kind of go into our next section of what we may expect for Constantinople, even though it's real early to kind of suggest stuff.
Yeah, so we just released a draft which is of the Casper paper, and I can actually just publish that in here. So, like, basically, theoretically, Casper may well be at the stage where we may actually just wants to go ahead and try doing it and doing it for the next fork, even if that sounds ambitious.
Okay, cool. So when you say Casper, you mean
hybrid proof of stake, the finality gadget, not Vlad's thing.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, that actually sounds more doable. And I know that there's a number of other EIPs we've talked about, including Matt DeFerrante's different elliptic curve precompile that he wanted to put in, and just a number of other things. The Blake 2B function that Zuko wanted to put in, as well as Jaden. So we will probably start collecting those in the next few months. Probably post DevCon is when we'll really dive down into that.
Yep.
Sounds
good.
So as far as Constantinople goes, we don't need a timeline today at all, but if you wanted to include the Casper and the finality gadget and stuff like that, the first steps, when do you think that would be done, or is there any kind of timeline like Q1, Q2?
Yeah, so there's a so there's already a Python implementation which is like almost done. Well, there was one that was done for the previous version, but this version is simpler, and Carl is in the process of switching that over, and it should be done, I would even say, very soon. And the other thing is that the parts that aren't done, I would say, like, basically the parts that aren't done are like fine details of the contract, and so like the actual spec of the fork is not going to be particularly complex. It's basically just add some increase the balance of a contract, then change the fork choice rule and add by adding a couple of function calls going into the Casper contract. So if those details change, that's technically just would not affect like what happened the actual like anything of the client implementation by much.
Okay, sounds good. So the next thing, is there any other updates from anybody that they wanted to shout out? Cool. The next agenda item was website update. So some people were discussing if there's going to be a website update. That website is managed, ethereum.org is managed by the Ethereum Foundation, and there's been discussion to do an update to the website, a new theme and new content. That's going to take some time to curate, but just so everyone knows, that is in progress. There is a group coming together in order to start to accomplish that. So there's no timeline, but we are aware that people want an update to that, and we are working on it. So the next item, cross-team Quake 3 arena session. So this is the most important item, obviously. Number one, will Quake 3 work on the latest operating systems?
Ubuntu 16.04.
Yep. Ooh, we'll have to check that out. Anyways, yeah, maybe you can run in Wine or something. Anyways, yeah, that's kind of a joke one, but for real, we'll probably talk offline about getting a core dev meeting set up or something at DevCon, maybe. I don't know if we'll have the time, but if we can, then we will. The next core dev meeting will be in 4 weeks, because in 2 weeks we'll be at DevCon. So what we'll do is, 4 weeks from now, we will have our core dev meeting. That will be on the 17th of November, if I'm not mistaken. So that'll work fine. Let's see. I think that is everything on the agenda. So does anyone have anything else? Oh, Christian, you were talking about WebAssembly?
It was meant as a joke for Quick.
Oh. Hey, does anyone remember when someone did a contract in like Mutin or LLL that like was actually a compiled Quake contract?
I think it started with Solidity and then turned into the some JavaScript version of Quake. Yeah, right. I
Yeah,
remember.
it was like a Solidity contract. Oh, here it is. It's called Etherquake. Oh, Erie did this. Here y'all go. An implementation of Quake 3 in Ethereum. Oh, yeah, isn't Viper doing some cool stuff right now, Vitalik? I think...
Yeah, and well, Viper is, let's see. It's not sure if there's any particularly cool, mega cool thing to announce, except that like development is continuing. There is a web compiler for it now. Otherwise, just going well.
Did you? I saw something that it's going to be like formally proven or something, or tested by some organization.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that might be that. Might be connected to that KVM group.
Yeah, I thought that was it. And then, now that actually we're on that topic real quick, wasn't there something with Bamboo, Yoichi, where you recently implemented a vault contract and there's been some progress in Bamboo?
I'm starting to get external other contributors. One of them implemented numeric literals. Now you can 1 or 2 or 3 in Bamboo.
Nice. And then Solidity just had a new release, so congrats on that, Christian. There were some cool features.
Thanks.
I think that covers all the languages. Cool. Does anyone have anything else?
Yeah, I missed it about when we talked about Constantinople. I was just wondering, HEAP 86208, is that still in any way, shape, or form planned, or is it going to be replaced by something else?
I think that's still in kind of thinking about it mode.
Okay.
Is it still, are both of those still required for Serenity?
So theoretically, EAP86 is totally not required for for Casper.
Okay. Cool. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it. That's all the agenda. Anybody else have comments? Cool. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you in 4 weeks, and we'll see most of you at DevCon.
Yep.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.